Right, this is going to be another episode of Thorin's Big Brains. Obviously, I'm joined here by Zaboutine because one, he's sick, two, he's just got loads of time free and actually likes doing content, whereas normally when you message people, it's like, would you like to do this? And then half the time, there's 2 days later, like, sorry, I'm busy. Like, no, why 2 days later? Like, fucking hell, mate, I've got to get something for tomorrow night. Right now, I'll have to get bloody Wicked. Oh, I've given away the whole game plan there. Shit. Now they know my secret. Or whatever. That's a joke. We love Wicked. Even though now, apparently, doesn't even seem to care about League of Legends. He's just trying to make millions off NFTs, which in many ways, you have to understand, he's a top laner. It was always just about farming and getting his gold and his items. Never really about the rest of the map. He's just off fucking side laning for the rest of his career. And fuck the rest of us. We're all grouping trying to make money off content, but he's just off farming after NFTs and morons. So, right, Zaboutine. Obviously, we're down to the last 4 teams. Let's just start at the top, right? And the top detail has to be this. There was a not very nuanced discussion that took place in the community, mainly because we're talking about Reddit and Twitter, which, let's be real, they're just hot take machines, and they're not really about like putting a massive paragraph or long thing. It's kind of like, 2-sentence hot takes. So the 2-sentence hot take for the world so far goes like this. Oh, what happened to LPL? Oh, such a shame. Oh, I thought you guys said it was good. Then it's obviously all the smug people who like LCK going, LCK's back, baby, Korean Kingdom. And then if you're a real douche, I even do this sometimes just to trigger people. You go, and besides, even the LPL team is carried by 2 Koreans. And then basically you've just made it like Korean supremacy. We're back, baby. So here's the question, right, Zaboutine. Last year, the storyline went like this. Yes, Damwon is the best team. And in fact, because they won the tournament, they are the best in the world. But just like I always tried to temper LEC fans, like, listen, just because G2's sick does not mean LEC is as sick as G2. So don't talk shit on Koreans, for example, when they will be all the teams from Europe except G2. In the same sense, right, I was always trying to be like, look, Damwon's the best, but is LCK that good as a region? Right, since LCK has 3 out of the 4 teams in this particular semi-finals, it's a fair question to ask. Does this imply LCK is the best region? Has LCK been the best region at Worlds? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I say it's a very hard question. So in that case, I think that it's empirically easy to say that LCK, at least this year, has been performing much better than the other regions. And I think that one of the key reason for that, is that I always how do you call the thing that's at the at the ahead of the train that's like just pulling the rest of the train,
whatever, the cab or something, or whatever the first train is called, yeah.
Exactly. It's like we had G2 for Europe. I think that Damwon is playing this role for the LCK. I think that when you have a team that you can look up to, not every single team in LCK is going to scream Damwon on a regular basis, but you're not good enough, you can't beat Damwon. So the same way, if you look at, for instance, 2015, Fnatic was really good. You remember it was the 18-0 Fnatic.
Yes.
Look at how Region performed. They were in Challenger Series, trying to get to the up and downs, and they went up to the EU LCS for the summer. And just by screaming a lot, and you can ask the players from the team, right? They did 9 blocks and stuff against Fnatic to actually catch up, and they ended up being semi-finalists as well of Worlds that year. So I think that when you have a really good team to scream against, that helps a lot. And I think that not only they have a new generation of player, but I think that on top of that, they can proof test their ability to play the game. Whereas I think that, as I said in a previous podcast, I think that in Europe, the team that plays the best is Mad, but we see that even in Mad's play style, there are a lot of holes, whether it's individually or collectively, and they still get away with it, right? Mad has no one to scream against in their vicinity where they can actually proof test their ability to play the game. So they got surprised by Damwon, where Damwon wasn't surprised by Mad. And I don't think that Europe is like way worse. I don't think NA is way worse. I just feel like they're going to need one super team per region to actually teach the rest of the region how to play. And there hasn't been this year because I think that G2 is at an end of an era and they have to move to the next one. No team has taken that spot in Europe. So the best second team from the previous G2 is Mad Lions, and it's clear that this year that Mad Lions is not the best team in Europe, but they haven't been good enough to actually and there's no team that can compete against them. Like Fnatic had hold in their game, and we were speaking about it right during the playoffs. Rogue was the same, Misfits was the same, G2 was the same. So NA is NA. I think they've been performing very well for what they have, and I'm pretty happy with their performance. For the LPL though, I think it's very hard to understand, but I feel like there gonna be years where the game just doesn't fit LPL teams, and that's it. And I feel like this year is not one of them. I feel like LPL is very patch dependent, and when the patch fits one of their team and they can play, like when it was only team fight, IG won. When it was only push mid and roam, FPX won. But if you look overall at LPL performances, if the patch doesn't fit them, it's a very tactic era with a lot of like macro. They seem to struggle a little bit. But I don't think like they're bad. Their players are absolutely insane at the game. It's just the playstyle fits more Koreans at this year. And maybe next year, because of the variants and all the shutdowns, bloody team fights is just going to happen again. And now LPL is going to be back. But it comes down to a little bit of luck in how well you perform at World Championship.
Yes, I actually thought something quite similar, which is like, this is one of the areas, by the way, where I feel like that big picture, you would call it in English, like high resolution way of looking at this space. So basically you're looking as though you're like above and you're looking down at a tiny little map and, you know, a mountain is just a circle. It's not like all the detail of it. If you're looking overall at the regions, right, people also do that thing, dude, where they don't bother even asking, how did the game change? How was like Riot's influence on what's going on? Because I agree with exactly what you're saying. Like, if you go and look when IG won Worlds, if they don't make that particular meta for Worlds that changes it from a bot lane meta to a solo lane meta, IG probably doesn't win. If you don't take the tracker's knife out, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, Ning was a good jungler. He wasn't some fucking god-tier Korean like Score who's just tracking everyone all over the map. I also think IG probably doesn't win. Like, these things changed the game. So if you look when the LPL won, they did win when it was more about like fighting. I would say even like in some sense, not like individual strength, like one player carries the game, but like if you have a whole bunch of players who are really skilled in fighting, you will have these great skirmishes, great fighting. Even FPX, it's like essentially they just found the best way to play the meta. I'll even say this against G2. They weren't even that impressive against some of the other teams, but against G2 they had a fantastic way to play the game that G2 either A couldn't figure out or B didn't have the counter for in that final. So I will say, if you look at this particular time period, this is why that whole thing of like Koreans just got worse. It's like, no, some of the sort of win conditions and the things that the game is selecting for to be the best at changed, and Koreans, listen, just like many other regions, have their own strengths. And I think for a few years, they stayed in those strengths and they didn't really try to experiment. Now, I do think if you look at the Damwon lineups, if I could take them back in time to season 9, these lineups from last year and this year, they'd also, by the way, probably be able to mix it up in some of those mid-game fights and look pretty cool too. But I think you look at the metas that we've had last year and this year, they have been more suited to the LCK teams. And particularly, I saw this from FPX, dude. Like, I don't think it's just that FPX was like all players. Because that's the thing. If you notice, the LPL people are pretty much saying every player on FPX underperformed. Like, okay, maybe, but that's very rare that ever happens. I also thought when you looked at it, dude, they were doing weird moves. Like, sometimes they would just go to the side lane at a time where it's like, couldn't you all like push mid now or something, or gone for an objective? Like, it even seemed like their read on the meta was off. So what would you say it is that LCK, and maybe the best LCK teams, because obviously they're in the semi-finals now, what if they kind of read the best about either the meta champion-wise or stylistically? What do you think's made them strong in this particular time period?
I think there are two key factors. The one that makes LCK stronger as a region, and one that makes Damwon better as a team. The first one is just when they are looking for what's good on the patch, they have the most competitive, not only solo queue system, but scouting system. Yes. So most of the top players on the ladder are already placed in the academies, right? So people can reach out to pretty much any OTP on the server or very high solo queue player. And it's like, what's the current flavor, of this week on this patch? And they can just figure out the Yumis, the Talon jungle, all these things came from Korea, right? Yes. When you look at the very first games when Worlds started at group stage, the Chinese teams were playing Jarvan, Kai'Sa, Nautilus, like just press or combos, because this is what they thought was good on the Chinese super server. But when they moved and they played in Europe in solo queue, they can't really read, because the EU solo queue is not Korean solo queue. I don't think it's comparable. So Koreans have direct information on what's trending and what's best, because they have the best player playing. Like, you think like players such as like Dopa, I don't think he's playing anymore, but all the Korean mids that stayed home, they kept playing. They can, like, someone like Chowmaker can just go on the server and just check on like what's the highest win rate balance. So they have an edge in that sense. And I think that's a huge edge in terms of reading the meta fast, because they have just more players playing at a high level and the games are more competitive. What makes Damwon better, on the other hand, is I think that Damwon used to lose to European teams, right? They lose to G2, they wanted the revenge, they got it last year, but it's not a team that got built in a day. Like, people tend to forget that. But I think that what's the players from Damwon understood is you can't win a game just with macro. You need to use the macro to get a positional advantage and execute the positional advantage.
Right.
Damwon is the team on the planet that has the best understanding of positional, like real strategy. You know, what strategy stands for. Like, you're playing, I don't know, Cossacks all games, you know, on PC or Age of Empires. Like, you have a heal and you have archers, and the game, like, they use field and terrain up to their advantage, and they can execute that, right? Most of the teams, when you speak about macro with EU and people, right, in general, whether it's player, coaches, analysts, they're just like, oh yeah, sure, like, then you're first on the objective, so you're gonna get the objective. No, you're just not gonna get it because you're first. You're gonna get it because you need to be first, because you have a composition that requires to be first, and how you're gonna use the fact that you're first to execute your fight. That one was exactly. And if you look at the game 2 against Mad Lions, I've been reviewing it on the side on my channel, and just Damwon is executing a fight so well that one small mistake of understanding the position, from, like in chess, you just move a pawn and suddenly the evaluation is like straight losing. You can't do anything anymore. Exactly what happened. They came back on Baron. It was over. It was chessmate, and they knew it. So I think that the combination of having a locomotive, right, a best team in LCK that has already the best solo queue, plus a team that understands the game at a higher level than what older LCK teams used to do, creates a very, very good combo, right? It's a very good field to grow for a region. Nobody has something like this in any region.
That's actually one thing I wanted to pick up on, because I noticed actually exactly what you were saying, how you characterized it. Like, for example, when everyone says, oh, the game is all about using the tools Riot gives you to get ahead and win the game, which they mean the Herald, the Dragon, the Baron. Dude, everyone in the West, even top analysts, actually describe it how you do. They're like, oh, they were there first, therefore they control the objective. And that's like, but it isn't the case at all, because I've noticed myself, I do think some of the Western teams think that is the meta. Like, oh, they've outpositioned us. Like, you know, we're just going to have to like look for an opening or something. But I've noticed actually with some of the Asian teams, they might not even literally be the first to position. But if they have like the right engage, if they can obviously think they've caught the right player, it almost seems like being first doesn't matter as much. So what is your sense on this particular sense? Because I notice, again, it's like, if anything, now it's the West that's become the region that thinks there's, you know, a flow chart and it always goes like this. As you're saying, it's almost like the chess logic where the Koreans are like valuing a certain thing more, and then they're knowing which fight to take and when to take the fight, because they were obviously fantastic at some of these aspects.
I think that, yeah, that the thing is, being first is usually a better thing, right? Because if you're first, even if you have a poke comp, right? Poke comps are very good if they are the best comp if you don't have the position, because they can poke on the people who have the position, right? You think about Jace, you think about Jinx, Ziggs, Xerath, all these champions, they just poke from a long range, and you're on a Baron and you're just getting hit and hit and hit, and then you have to give it the position and you kind of like screwed. But even if you're on the position and you don't start the objective and people have to actually check your vision, it's very, very hard to fight against a poke comp. It's very hard to fight against a huge engage comp. So usually having the position is most of the time good, but it doesn't need like, how do you flank, which spell you're going to start with, how do you want to fight? Do you want to fight by going forward? You know, if for instance, like enemy has Cassiopeia, right? Cassiopeia likes to receive, right? You walk to Cassiopeia, she's happy, because she's really bad at running towards people. And you're going to see Western teams when Cassiopeia is meta, just they have the position, but suddenly someone flashes, they all go to Cassio and they just all die. And you're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't do that, right? So, I mean, I'm taking an extreme random example, but you get my point. Damwon, for instance, if you look at this series, they always know, like, they're always looking for a flank. They are looking patiently for a flank. And if they can't find a flank and it's covered, they're just going to try to get like meter per meter, a little bit of field, right? Like, they're using the fact that people give them space for free. And once they have enough space, if they see that someone is out of position, they're going to pull the trigger. And they pull the trigger very, very fast. And so you're always worried about Damwon walking on your field, and they're never worried about you walking on them. And that's the big difference. And I feel like that's just coaching, understanding that this is very good to teach macro to players, but like in chess, you give them a position and they have to make the resolution. Otherwise, building the position is good, but that's the same in chess. If you know your openings and you end up with a very strong positional advantage, but you're not able to play the mid game or do the end game when you have like 1 pawn, one knight, and your king, you don't win the game. So that's the same thing. If you don't win the team fight, no matter what the lead is, no matter what the items are, right? Like Mad was way ahead in that game too. They lost the game because they made few positional mistakes and they couldn't execute their position as well as Damwon does. That's this level understanding goes after the macro, which is kind of new, right?
Right.
And I feel like Western team needs to catch up on that, and even Chinese team.
One thing I want to follow up on that then is, since we have the 3 Korean teams, and as you said, okay, Damwon's the locomotive, they're kind of out in front, they're pulling the other ones with them, metaphorically in this sense. Just as I don't want people in the past to go, Europe was the best region. It's like Europe was never the best region. G2 might have been the best team. That's a very different equation entirely. By the way, you could go and ask Fnatic, Splice, like these teams would tell you that we weren't as better than fucking FPX, we weren't better than the elite level teams necessarily. So here's my question, right? If I look at the 3 Korean teams that made it this far, let's be real, who gives a fuck about Hanwha? They don't even fit in this discussion. Like, they don't actually even fit any of what you talk about with Koreans. But if I look at the 3 Korean teams, right? If I take Damwon and make them the paragon of all the good things you've said about the meta and how to play it, if I look at the other 2 teams, as a layman, the obvious way to break it down goes like this. Gen.G actually seems fairly weak at what you're discussing. Like, I've seen them get to the mid game with leads and just sometimes not be able to close out. Sometimes, they can't even close out when they're basically like pushing in the base. Like, they don't always even take the inhibs right or the fights right. I've seen them lose a massive fight that opened the game. I think it was against TL in the group stage. I've seen them just be too cautious and keep going back and have to take dragon after dragon or take extra fights where, I actually think Damwon or someone would have just ended the game. And then if I look at T1, because of the whole faker element where they're using this weird style where it doesn't actually try to sort of dominate the lane typically, it seems like they're just about getting super far ahead in the early game. And then listen, as Rogue showed you in Europe, the easier you make the early game, in theory, you just make your decisions in the mid game a little bit like easier to make, or they've got more punch behind them, as it were. How would you contrast all 3 teams? If Damwon's the best at this stuff, where do the other 2 fit in, do you think?
I think T1 surprisingly caught up extremely fast between the end of Summer Split and now. They play a much more aggressive playstyle than Damwon, but I think that in terms of individual expression in the first 15 minutes of the game, they are like 2 ranks above Rogue, and that puts them
right.
Even, I would say, individually, probably even on par, even if not above.
Maybe the best, right?
Yeah. So I think that's why the match against Team One and Damwon is so exciting, because I feel like, I would say, I don't know if it's like brain and muscle. I think that T1 is probably 60% muscle and 40% brain, and Damwon is probably 60% brain and 40% muscles. And this is very hard to gauge who's improved the most. I think T1 improved the most, but are they good enough? I think they are to actually give us probably one of the highest level series of all time. So I'm very I'm extremely excited about watching it. I'm extremely, because I feel like I've seen T1 fail at executing some fights that were very simple. The first example, they drafted a full poke comp in the first game against EDG, and they just all tried to get a herald like hard engaging on them, and just all died, and they lost the game out of that. And I was like, that's very questionable for a team of the caliber of T1 to do this mistake. But beside this hoopsie, they've been consistently making extremely smart plays and being able to like pull extremely good fighting situations pretty much anywhere on the map, and they seem to have a lead. Even Faker against Chovy, if you look at the first game, because they were the one where like Lissandra versus LeBlanc, so you can't really gauge players on that. But the Oriana game that Faker played was against Zoe, as far as I remember, was extremely close with Showmakers. I feel like individually every player at T1 is very, very sharp. So I think that it's very hard to compare the two, and I can't really tell you. Like, I would put Damwon favorite, because that's the one that we've seen leading the whole year. Yes. So the past is gonna give that edge. Gen.Ge seems not there yet in terms of whether it's pace of the game, understanding of like fight resolution, positional advantage, division, closing out the games, as you said, like pulling the trigger. Historically, has been something that's very hard for Gen.Ge. I feel like they have players that are fearful. And fear is never a good thing. Like, you need to be very cold-minded and just analyze what you have in your plate and eat it, right? And I feel like Gen.Ge usually, if they win, they start being more careful. they're pretty aggressive in the early game, and whenever they get the lead, they try to just lock the crate, and then they don't touch it until like just get the items, and then they can just win the game from outscaling. I think against a Chinese team, this can lead to problems, especially EDG that seems to be pretty good at the game and improving from the group stage. I wouldn't take, even though the series against RNG was not that great quality, I would never underestimate Chinese teams after quarterfinals, but usually this is where they start shining. But I would say no. I would say T1 and Damwon are on another level, and then you have Gen.G that seems to be more an underdog in this tournament.
Okay. One thing I want to ask just before we go into the specific matchups and get a bit more into it, it goes like this. When you mentioned earlier, there were teams you could see at this tournament who thought you can just do the press R comps. We can make it nice and simple. And there are times in League where sometimes that is the best way to play, especially, by the way, if you're a lesser team. Now, at the risk of sounding like Freak when he made that mad analysis of Rumble Jungle in the fucking MSI, right? If you remove the absolute elite teams, like obviously if Damwon plays a press R comp, yeah, they're going to fucking win on it because the Damwon, they can win on most comps. If I take out the super good teams, to me, what shows that actually some of these comps haven't been as easy or as effective as people thought is I look at some of the other teams out there and I've seen teams, dude, where people came in thinking like, if you can have like a Yumi and, or if you can have like the Jarvan and MF, this is easy. You know, you just like, you go in with the Jarvan and then you do the MF fault, like, you know, they're trapped, you get it all off, or you have the Yumi on something, and then like, oh, look, it's a nightmare, you catch them, you do the MF. Like, they made this sound really easy. Like, it's going to be so easy to execute. Dude, I was seeing so many scuffed MF faults, so many fights where like they weren't coordinated with this. Do you think like, what's your take on that angle where people tried to make some of the kind of simple comps? It feels like they didn't always work. Like, oh, it wasn't as easy as people thought it would be.
Has Jarvan been meta a single week this year in MF? Like, no.
Doesn't feel like it,
no.
right?
Right. It's like last year MF was meta, and I think that I don't know, when you think about Karzi, for instance, like he hasn't been extremely performing like he has been playing very, very well, but I don't think like he's a misfortune player. I don't think Gala is a misfortune player. Yeah, like
sure.
you see Gala play on Kaisa and you feel like this guy's absolute monster, and you see Gala play on Misfortune like he missed time his ultimate, because Misfortune is kind of a caster in one sense,
yes.
you know, and she doesn't play as any other ADC, so she kind of skips some fundamentals that helps some players that just want to press buttons, but not everyone feels comfortable on the current meta. That's one thing that needs to be understood, is like Lucian was not played bot for 2 years. Ezreal's played, but it's not the most meta one.
True.
So aside from Aphelios, right? Aphelios and Misfortune, which is kind of the standard. So Aphelios player, like you see these very good ADCs, like Karzi, like Gala, when they have Aphelios, they feel very confident. But I feel like it's a playstyle that's very, very hard to play. So that's why I feel it's a little bit scuffed, because these champions haven't been meta for long. And on the other hand, I'm telling you, I feel like working on team fights is something that's underworked on. People spend their days. I mean, I've been working in a team. And I've been wrong, right? I was part of the people that thought like, oh, you have the position, therefore it's gonna. It's right. Like it's like half a year after I got like fired that I was like, man, I was so stupid. Like I should have worked on fight.
People just think like you get in a position for the fight and then it plays itself out. Everyone knows how to play. It's one of those, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I thought the same. I was like, then he can't do anything.
Yes.
Of course they're gonna. Do you think they're gonna give the Drake on stage? They're not gonna give the Drake. They're gonna give you a fight and they're gonna give you a hard fight. So if you can't execute that fight, then your training is worthless. And that's something I was wrong on. I was like, it was one of my biggest like.
Fair enough.
Among my failures as a coach. But no, after the realization, I know the need of it, and I see that it's just like lackluster. It's just lacking in the West, and in some teams, just you see these teams like. Are they used to play this team fight situation? I don't think so. They should play ARAM with these comps and just play like 5 hours of ARAMs against the academy, and they would be actually better at executing Shockwave, Jarvan Ultimate, Misfortune, and Leona than any other team in at Worlds. But nobody can do that, because at Worlds you have you, and you. So you can't really improve.
Yeah, by the way, dude, I actually thought, listen, I will admit I am using confirmation bias, because whenever I find something that fits like what I always thought, I do always reference this. But I'm kind of a hater of the concept of global meta thinking. I mean, put it this way, the most extreme example would be all those fucking idiots trying to play Tryndamere mid. I can tell you, I have a guy who's a challenger player in NA who's a Tryndamere one trick, and he was saying like, look, he doesn't think he's like the best player in the world, but like every single player who did Tryndamere mid in this tournament, like they misplayed massively, they didn't understand how to use use the ult sometimes. They didn't know how to always like use pressure and go and do something else. So similarly, right? I actually did think similarly, mate. Like if you think of what the ADCs have been playing the last few years, I mean, the joke is the only person who actually kind of was able to use Lucian was fucking Xiaohu because he just took it top lane all the time and he already plays it. Like they aren't. This isn't season 4. Everyone isn't a Lucian master who plays ADC. They've been playing different things ADC. Everyone isn't actually a guy who knows how to play MF. That's such a different. Like if you think of Kazi's strengths, because obviously when he first came in LEC, he was a monster. He doesn't play a champion like fucking MF, where he's just stood still hoping that the ult goes across one specific area. That's alien to the kind of champion this guy wants to play. So I also think, some of the coaches. You know, people always say, well, the coach can't teach the players how to play. And, it's up to the player to know how to play. You still have to kind of like know what the strengths of your player are. And you have to kind of sometimes know, look, yes, the best team in the world might use this champ, but maybe we can't. Like maybe sometimes we should go off meta sometimes. I think even that's one area, by the way, where occasionally the Chinese teams, as much as they're kind of mocked by the others for not following the meta, I at least get their logic. Like they sometimes go to the comfort champions, even though they were terrible at this tournament. At least Doinby thought at one point, look, nothing's working. I'll go to my fucking Rumble mid, which no one even plays. So, what do you think on this angle? Because like you're saying, as a coach, it's almost more of like an abstract discussion, right?
When that the game is in a good state, when different playstyles can actually succeed. And although I try not to put too much burden on Riot Games' shoulder, like too much weight on Riot Games' shoulder, I feel like their item changes have been erasing a good 5 years of balance. And if you look at this year's meta, everything has been extremely polarizing. Like it's saddening to watch as a like I would say as an expert. Is just everybody has to play the most OP thing at the moment, and that's.
Are we talking about like the mythics here? Because everyone does say like basically everyone has to build certain, like it's not really much diversity in, is it? You just pick that one and then you have to put it on the best champ, right?
Exactly. It's just which champ abuses which item,
right.
and which champs combined with that champ, right? It's like it's not about, because back then a year ago. The item set that we had was the kind of the result of a fine tuning of 3 or 4 years, of like removing an item, adjusting this. So people knew like how much like cooldown reduction they would have, mana pool, AP, AD, regen, tankiness. Everything was kind of set, and Riot was just fine tuning figures where like to just like at this point. Really feel like it's chaos. Like some champion have no item if Gordrinker is true, so they just die, and then. Oh, Gordrinker is strong, and all these champions just come back. And then you see Lee Sin Gordrinker, you see Xinzao Gordrinker, you see Aatrox Gordrinker, and you're like, okay, so it's Gordrinker meta. Everybody like Talon. Talon is an assassin. Why doesn't he build lethality? Oh, because Gordrinker. And then you just pick champs that have very polarizing design, such as Yuumi, right? Yuumi is always going to be either absolutely useless, either absolutely obnoxious to play against and OP, and she's OP in that patch. So I feel like this is very good. Like going back to your weapons is really good when the game is in a good state.
Right.
Perfect example, 2019. G2 playing random picks, playing through the side lanes. IG playing through their strength. You had Griffin playing the Elise Camille mid in the group stage against C9. Everybody was playing what they were good at. And you really felt like, some teams want to group and fight, some teams want to play the side lane, some teams want a heavy speed push, some teams want to poke. Everything was viable, or almost everything was viable. Right now, it's like, how the draft is going to play out. 70 champions picked in the tournament so far, since group play-in. 70 unique champions, like maybe 75 at this point. That's so small. That's so small. There is no space for expression. So who masters the patch the most is just going to win.
Yes. If people don't know, by the way, just because this is a classic comparison, basically Dota has like almost the opposite game design philosophy. It's not very restrictive. And they famously have a thing that they do at TI where it's almost just like they count down how many days it is till like almost every single hero in the game is being used at some point. Because obviously, if you don't know, they can sort of flex them all around the different lanes as well. It's not kind of as like streamlined as League is. So yeah, like in theirs, famously, there've been times I think where almost every single hero was used at TI, which by the way, I will say has a lot more games. So there's also that element to kind of like control group in this sense. Okay, here's what I want to do. Let's start talking about the specific matchups. So we'll go in the order that they're going to happen. So T1 versus Damwon is the first one. Now for this one, you kind of set it up earlier and hinted at it. I notice all the people I know who I consider experts and analysts at the game in League, they started like I did. If you watched LCK, Like, basically, until the playoffs, T1 looked fucking whack. I didn't even think they made it to the final. Then in the final, it's like, wow, they have leveled up a bit, and they've sort of started to find which lineup to use. Then in the final, it was like, this isn't even that bad. Like, look, that one's clearly better, but they actually gave him like a little bit of a fight, you know. Then coming into Worlds, like, obviously, look, if you top the group when you're a team like this, that's very impressive. A lot of people thought EDG, the LPL champ, LPL is supposed to be the best. They're supposed to, so I feel like everyone feels like it's like Dragon Ball Z. They're powering up as they go, you know. They get like round after round after round. And I've noticed this. When they got to the semis, it was easy for me to use context to go, they played Hanwha life. Like, Hanwha shouldn't even have been there. Hanwha had the like group with Fnatic. You know, I could give all the context to kind of downplay it. But after that series, I notice most of the analysts, what they're seeing with the eye test and what you're talking about stylistically and macro-wise, how they've leveled up in T1, people actually feel like this semi-final is the real final. Essentially, the replay of the LCK final is, for most people, what the real final. They think whoever wins this probably wins Worlds. So the reason why that's actually very interesting to me is other people, if you'd asked them at the quarterfinals or in groups, if you'd have said you get these 4 teams in the semis, they said, perfect, EDG Damwon's the real final. That's what we're all waiting for. So it sounds like you've changed. Is that where you're sitting at right now? Are T1 and Damwon the best 2 teams in the tournament? Should this be the best match?
Yeah, on the paper, yeah. I still think that because of the drawing system, you'll never know, right?
Of course,
because,
yes.
Yeah, give us a loser bracket, please. But I'd say, yeah, on the paper and from what we've seen so far, I would never exclude the fact that LPL teams have a tendency to kind of step up drastically around quarterfinals once they digested the patch and stuff. So
true.
I'm still gonna give myself some space to say that EDG versus whoever the winner is gonna be might be even a higher level series. But from what we've seen, yeah, it should be, because I think that the understanding of League has never been that high, especially from like what Korean and Damwon specifically brought to the game. I feel like it might be the highest level series of all time, like kind of a reminiscence of SKT versus Rocks of 2016 that kind of felt, or even Samsung Galaxy, like the final of Worlds 3-2. Every game was like 45 minutes because nobody was making a single mistake for pretty much 6 hours straight. I have this type of feeling, but you never know. Like sometimes it's just a straight 3-1. What's very interesting is you were speaking about the summer, right? The summer split. And yeah, Damwon beats T1, but at the regional finals, there was HLE versus T1, and it was a very close 3-2. And people tend to forget that. It was a very, very close 3-2. And now if you look at the difference, it's a straight 3-0. There was not even like a suspense on the outcome of the series. So I'd say that this T1 is nothing like what we've seen during the summer split. And yeah, I expect the series to be the most mind-blowing League of Legends we've seen so far, pretty much. But I'm a expert on the game. I'm not, kind of a predictionist. So that's just my expectations. That's my excitement, but I can't predict the future.
Right, here's that question though, because on the one hand, I've also heard a lot of people say that, like they're actually now hyped for this semi. Suddenly it's not just like, like taken for granted that T1 has to lose and they can't win the tournament. In fact, as I said, most people actually feel like if T1 wins, that basically implies they win Worlds, which obviously would be incredibly shocking, by the way. The narratives on the whole Faker and all the rest of it would be incredible to talk about. But I want to roll it back a sec. Here's my question for you. If I focus only on Damwon, last year, I think some people would put that Damwon, especially the way they won Worlds, in contention for like maybe best team ever. Like they'd be on the list at least. They have to at least be mentioned in the conversation, even if you end up dismissing them and going with an SKT lineup of old or a Samsung White or something. But this is the interesting thing. Even though I know Khan's reputation and the baggage that he hasn't won like the big international tournaments sort of makes people almost want to dismiss this year's Damwon, I also get the sense from my expert friends, they also think this team might even be better than the team last year. Like this is an incredibly dominant team. They're really hard to beat. So this is my question. Is Damwon actually the clear best team outside of them and T1? And if so, if that is indeed what you would imply, does that mean T1's essentially, they're not just stylistically, they're actually the second best team if they're going to make this an epic series?
Yeah, I think so. I think that T1's second best team in the tournament and Damwon is the best. And yeah, I rejoin your points. I feel like they have improved. I don't think that it comes from Khan or Nuguri. I think that Nuguri is still individually a slightly better player than Khan. But I feel like surprisingly Canyon has improved.
Yes.
Like Canyon has immensely improved on like reading the map and him and Showmaker understand the game at a level that's like, you just see someone walking on a world and the whole game plan of the whole team just shifts in a second and everybody does exactly what they have to do. So I don't know what the kind of system they've put in place in terms of communication, but that's mind-boggling how to see. Like, I'm doing reviews, on my channel, and at some point I'm like, oh yeah, he sees that jungle on that wall, and now you see the support pushing bot, resetting, going directly top, and the dive top, and you're like, they just saw one guy on one world, and then the whole map just played accordingly. And that's the kind of thing that you're like, you're screaming with your players, and you have no fog of war, and you ask them, what do you think is the best play? And they just think for like 30 seconds, and like, I think the best thing is that. Damwon does that like live in the game.
Like 3 seconds.
And that's crazy.
That's crazy. Okay, let me ask you this then. So since you're looking for this to be a hype series, let's go from the T1 side, because I feel like people understand the strengths of Damwon. I mean, let's be real right now. The reason why they're in contention for all this, like, are they the best team? It's because like they're basically good at almost everything in the current meta, it feels like. And as a result, another thing that actually is giving me kind of Samsung White flashbacks is a bunch of their players just have, again, like champion oceans that can basically play whatever the fuck they want. Like Showmaker has been making a fool out of people with some of his champion pool this tournament. He can basically just play anything he wants, it feels like, and style on people. From the T1 side, though, the angle I'm interested in is people put so much emphasis on this like selfless faker style. Like you play TF, you just go around the map. You're not just playing to play in lane. I mean, people even set it up like, who cares about Chovy versus Faker? It's basically like Chovy versus T1, and then Faker's just helping T1 get strong, and it won't even matter who. But in the actual matchup, T1, actually Faker even was looking fine in lane against Chovy. That wasn't even like the big problem. That wasn't really even how people build it. So here's the question. Do you think T1 has to play the like play to the outskirts of the map style, as it were? Can Faker actually, for real, just kind of say, right, now's my time to go head-to-head with Showmaker? How does T1 kind of get in this series and have a chance to win and make it close?
I think any close series always played out from draft. Like, draft is more, the better the player are, the more draft is important, because they're going to play accordingly to the matchup, which there are going to be specific waves where they're going to have prior, and they're going to do something that your opponent can't do unless he moves with you, so therefore he loses a wave, which is big at a very, very high level of game. I'd say so. First thing is playing draft, and then playing for sides. Like, T1 is a team that plays for their side lanes. That's true that Faker doesn't, like, I hate the narrative of like Faker as being selfless. That's not this thing. It's like, Faker understands the role of a mid laner in modern League of Legends, which is not trying to solo kill his opponent. It's trying to get as much resources for the mid game while trying to find good waves where he can push and rotate to a slow push on the side, to execute a dive, or offer a recall to his team. So he's trying to give space to his side laners that are new, not rookies, but sophomore and rookies that are extremely proficient at the game and are able to create this slow push on side because they're good in laning. So Faker understands the scheme, where he plays a cornerstone in every single proactive play from T1, and since he doesn't have to go through him beating his opponent, soloing his opponent, he doesn't play for that, right? But that's not like, oh, I'm selfless. It doesn't make any sense. Like, if he can solo kill someone, trust me, he's gonna do it. So I think that the most important thing is T1 has to draft for a side lane and play and cater to the play style, like pull Canyon and Showmaker towards the lane they're strong on, right? It's like, oh, you want to cross map up, you're gonna lose the game, so gonna have to play on your weak side. Like, if they can do that, then it's gonna be very interesting. And everybody speaks about the bot lane, like, oh yeah, if T1's bot lane is better because yada yada, but it depends heavily on the matchup. What we know from the experience is, if Kana has a good matchup, he can do it as well. So I think what's very important is mid to top or mid to bot is going to be very, very important, because I think that, the early game plays more in favor of T1. So if they draft matchup where they can get the lead and do what Mad Lions did, but in a better way, which is, for instance, draft a Jace and play between the tier 1 and tier 2 and not let Khan play the game, is completely fine. And then you can win the game, right? If Mad Lions didn't do this mistake that I don't think T1 will do, then they can win games. But I don't think that playing just stable and trying to play for Drakes is going to help T1, because I think that in the field of defending Drake and coming back to the positional thing that we were speaking about before, I think that Damwon has the best team fights on the planet, in Showmaker especially. I think that's where he beats Chovy. I think that he's the best team fighter player probably of all time. Like, just team fighting with Canyon and Showmaker feels like impossible. Like, against them, it's impossible.
By the way, just so people know where you're at on the meta of the Drakes, is this a meta? Do you think there are specific Drakes you could just give up, for example? Are there good, like, counter objectives, or is it worth sometimes pushing a lane instead of taking a certain drag? Where you at on that? Because I don't know if... I always wonder, people always take it for granted, you go to every Drake and then you see if you can get a fight off. What do you think in the current meta?
I mean, Riot is very set. Like, they're even creating new Drakes to make it even more polarizing.
True, yes.
That's the most polarizing mechanic in the game, because you have no wards to cover your split pushers, right? They remove the wards, and at the same time they made the Drake very strong and very easy to snowball from. So it's not that, like, you've seen many teams lose with soul. Like, it's not like you get the soul and you win the game. That's not true. But the thing is, it's rare that you have something better to do every 5 minutes than just walking and trying to defend the Drake. And you can't just finish with one Baron either. So they made the Baron weak enough and the Drake strong enough in a way that it's better to kind of defend the just teams trying to pile up Drakes. And from that it creates a very polarizing, oh, it's Drake, let's press all of buttons, and we have like exciting team fights. Riot's happy. Average players in solo queue are very happy because it's very simple for them to understand the game. It's like, oh, you didn't go to Drake, I'm quitting the game. But on a higher level, I'd be very, very, very happy to see more diversity in the win conditions. But unfortunately, the game revolves around team fighting, around in the vicinity of the dragons, pretty much. That's it.
I'll even say to people, by the way, as much as part of me does wish, now that I also know what happened to Europe, as much as I wish we could just put perks back, ADC on G2 and run it for a third year and see if they can pull off all the magic and do amazing. I'll say this, realistically, they would never be as good as Season 9, because think about what they could do in Season 9. They had some of the best split pushers who could go and split push like masters and not get caught and put pressure on the map. And then also, as that T1 series famously showed, they could give up Drakes and go and push the right lane. And if not, like, be equal, only be slightly behind or make it not be a big deal. Like, you can't basically do that right now, right? Like, there's certain times in the game where, as you're saying, like, it's just so heavily shifted to the dragon. And if you are the better team with the better comp, you're probably just going to go for it anyway. It's the obvious win condition, right?
Yeah, it's just, as I say, it's very polarizing because it's win more and it's a comeback mechanic at the same time.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's just, I think that Riot has a very huge taste for telegraphed strategy.
Yes.
In a way that simpler players can have a comparable experience of their games and when they watch the stream.
Yes.
So that's why they got rid of the swap lanes and all these things. So I do understand why, but there is not that much space for anything besides fighting. That's why Damwon is that strong. I don't think that's because the game revolves around what they're the best at, which is using the field to fight around objectives. That's what the absolute masters at, and not that they're worse, like bad in other. They could play a lot of playstyle because they're insane, but this is where they are like unbeatable at. And if you look since 2 years, nobody has really found like crack the code of like how to get Drakes against Damwon. If they have the Reaver, you should just win the game. And that's sad for me because I would love to have more diversity, but that's a whole another topic where it's like, we'll have to blame Riot for like half an hour.
Of course,
they narrowed the options in the game.
So as you said, right, basically, assuming people expect that Faker can potentially play the style that isn't about just going head-to-head with Showmaker, it's about what he can do for his team. The other two lanes have a very interesting set of matchups, because even though on paper, like, for example, if we go to bot lane, that's what everyone always points out with Damwon, because it's like the one kind of hole you can poke in the top team. It's like, oh, well, maybe, Ghost and Beryl, like, they aren't the best even Korean players at that position, and maybe in their team, like, they obviously seem like the worst players. Here's what I want to ask you, is this is an area where I don't feel as though you can do those one-to-one, or in this case, 2v2 comparisons as much, in the sense that you have to remember what team they play in. Like, there's two ways you can go in this way. Like, let's imagine, for example, Damwon thinks to themselves, well, everyone's saying that this T1 bot lane's the best in the tournament, they're going to attack us through bot. If you have players like Showmaker and Canyon, they can potentially be the ones who take the hit in the draft and just get Ghost and Beryl the best possible champions for the bot lane. That's a way to short up. Also, you can go the other way and you can say, we won't give them much. By the way, there are also people who seem to be absolutely fine playing kind of like in Counter-Strike, we'd call it kind of the bitch role, like the kind of the guys who just sacrifice, let's put it that way. That would be the polite way to say it. You sacrifice. And that if, in order, by the way, that even if you get like a lead in bot lane in CS or a couple of kills, well, if Showmaker and Canyon have their absolute best champions, like if Canyon is on lead city, he's probably going to smash everyone's head in, isn't he? So what do you think about this angle? Like, I don't think it's all well and good saying, attack their bot lane. It feels like even for T1, it's going to be hard to specifically do that.
Yeah, it's very hard because the champions that are available to do so are very limited. The only dual lanes that actually really smash lanes are the Nami Lucian lanes, which I think is very not that hard to counter. Once you understand that you just need the mood. If you push mid and you go to the Lucian lane every single wave, like Lucian is not gonna play like a madman,
Right.
and Lucian only does one thing, which is playing like a madman, so he can't really play the game. So we're probably gonna see a lot of misfortune versus Aphelios, and we've seen that unless a major misstep happens in the laning phase, it seems to be very, very 1v1 farming lanes, and the support are roaming all over the map. And usually that's why you see a lot of action around the top lane in this patch, is just because the it's very hard to win bots. Like you don't even build a slow push. Like you want to build a slow push, just misfortune, just press her buttons. Aphelios clears very, very fast as well. So they try more to get a lead on the top side of the map. So I'd say on that sense, yeah, T1 has probably the better bot lane, but I think that the series has they have a better chance on trying to play the way Mad Lion did, which is finding a good matchup for Kana and trying to play support, jungle, mid, and top on top lane, which is what Mad Lion did, and he played very, very well.
For all the shit talking on Khan historically, and obviously there's the whole narrative where it's like he looks like he is, because he knows his career's ended, suppose it's going to end after this tournament. Obviously he is chasing the world championship, like he went to FPX, oh shit, they won last time, can I win this time? Didn't do it. Then he comes to Damwon, like, oh you guys won, right, can I join, can I win worlds next? Right, here's the question I have. If I actually look at it and I forget that his name is Khan, I'll take the nameplate off. He's been playing really fucking well in this tournament and he looks like the best top laner. But here's the interesting detail for me. I've never been a huge Kana fan. I thought there was better players at times in LCK at top lane. But he feels like a player who's evolved in T1. He feels like a player who maybe he's playing well in this tournament, actually, and he's probably surprised some people. What do you think about the top lane matchup for T1 against Damwon?
I mean, the youth always have a known potential, and Kana has this. So, and it's usually League of Legends likes to give the rights to the youth. So maybe Kana is gonna get the edge, but that's true that on paper, Kana has been playing just overall flawless. He has been playing absolutely amazing the whole tournament. I don't know, like maybe it's a swan song of a player that really wants it more than anything else, and he's gonna get it this year, and it will be a great storyline. I don't know why people hate on Khan. Yeah. Like I met the guy in person. He's nothing but nice, very agreeable. I've never heard bad feedbacks about the player. Very hardworking, and just wants it. Yeah, he's maybe a little bit of a choker in very, very important moments. So maybe if it happens to be a game 5 and there is a very decisive draft, maybe he's gonna make like one misstep, and everybody's gonna be like, can KW, which like this guy is an absolute monster. And yeah, without pressure, with the confidence he has right now, he's playing the best League of Legends he ever played. And I would say he's a little bit favorite on the paper, but the youth and the solo queue Korean players like Kana is really, really good at the game. Like this is a 50-50 matchup for very different reasons, but I would say it's a 50-50 matchup. Like the draft is gonna kind of give the edge naturally to the player who has the better champion for the laning phase.
Yes. I mean, listen, aside from the choking part, which I do think it's just like, this is where just like fans are sometimes immature. Like they just think it's hilarious that people choke. In a way, by the way, I think when it's great players who choke, it's kind of tragic, actually. Like, I mean, listen, I'll give you an obvious example right now. We have an LEC. When I see players like Inspired and Larson having some of these games internationally, I'm like, dude, I know in terms of your skill. And if this was a game that had no pressure, you wouldn't do some of these things. You wouldn't play that way. You wouldn't play scared sometimes, or you wouldn't refuse to take a chance. If I took the nameplates off, you would be better than this, but you aren't. So I personally think it's tragic. I always pull for all great players to get over that and become a champion, or prove that they can do it in the big game and be clutch, But the other part I do think that is really overblown about the Khan storyline is, I'll say it straight up, for all the people who say, it's boring when Koreans, in the old Korean interviews where they would go, oh yes, thank you very much, please cheer for me and I will show good games. I very much respect Bjergsen. He is, sort of as good as Fake. And they would just say all the lies that everyone wanted to hear, like they would pander to you, right? Everyone in theory goes, that's boring, they're just saying PR answers. But the second that any Korean who isn't the absolute best shit talks and trash talks, everyone gets butthurt in the West. So the problem is, if you go and look, ever since he was in Longju, Khan has been trying to do that, right? He's always been trying to give Westerners what they love in the spicy interviews. Like, he always says that, like when he was in Longju, he said that shit where it was like, or Kingzone rather. He was saying before I'm a silent, I'll make all the other top laners bow to me or something. And then obviously in this tournament, he was sort of acting like everyone's just trash except him, Basically, the problem is, it's like he does the trash talk. And I think people would love him, dude, if he then did win the tournament. But because he then also chokes, it's like, to them, it's like, it's the biggest outrage of all time. All I'll say is this: don't worry, Doublelift did the same thing for his entire career. When he didn't win any trash talk, everyone was like, oh, what an idiot, Doublelift trophy case. Now he's won everything in LCS. It seems cool that he did that. Now it's like, oh, thanks for the storylines, Doublelift. You made the league more entertaining. Please come back. The other guys just played EC. You're a personality. So I agree. I think the Khan hate's overblown. Certainly, until he wins Worlds, I'll have a hard time putting him ahead of Smeb, the great, best top laners of all time. But if he does win Worlds, what a satisfying career arc. And once he adds a tournament like Worlds, mate, this guy's got a lot of accomplishments. He's got a very good resume. He's won a lot of championships. He's been a very good player for a long time. I think basically the people who hate him, listen, even if you don't like a player, you have to give it up for greatness eventually. Once people do get there, you have to give them their credit as well.
Yeah, of course, it's very important, and I think he has 6 LCKs.
Exactly,
Def
that's
never
not
won Worlds. Yeah. So no, Smeb never won Worlds.
Smeb never won. Yeah.
Score never won Worlds. Yeah. Def never won Worlds, and some people like Imp won Worlds and they disappeared.
True.
So what do you say? What are you saying? Like, it's just winning Worlds is very good, right? It's like the best achievement, and that's the biggest adrenaline rush you can have in your life. But consistency over the years is something that you need to give props to, right?
Yes.
People give like. You spoke about Bjergsen, right? You can be a Bjergsen hater, you can be a Bjergsen lover, you can be like the consistency of that guy and all the noise I've heard about his work ethics and stuff over the years. Like, some people would have cashed out, after a few really great years and would just quit. Like, he's coming back to play in 2022. That has nothing to prove to anyone. It's just because he loves the game, he loves competing, and he probably like this drives him more than like just makes him like wake up in the morning. So I think it's very important to understand that players like I say that in French, especially about Sven. I was like, yes, he seems to be choking more with the years. Like, he seems to take the pressure more because, I don't know, like some block to happen into his brain or something. But he did a semi-final on his rookie year of Worlds. And he lost to SKT in 2015. Like, who is to blame? And he has like a fantastic resume. And now, after all these years, you come and it's like, oh, this guy is so stupid.
Yes.
No, he's not. Because Cloud9, I know Cloud9, they would not keep Sven if he was terrible and if he wasn't bringing anything to the table.
Yes.
Because guess what? Cloud9 can buy pretty much anyone they want on the planet. So if they keep Sven, it's because he's bringing something to the table. And that's the same thing with Khan. Like, who's going to refuse an offer from Damwon for top lane?
True.
Nobody. Absolutely nobody. So if they choose Khan, it's because Khan is bringing a fantastic thing to the table. And people have to respect the choice of someone like Koma, who's selecting him and praising him and putting him into a good like mental state to actually play his best League of Legends he's played ever after like many years. I don't think like we should make fun of these players. I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's true.
Yes.
Even if it's funny for some people, I think we are just stepping away from the truth by actually saying Khan is a choker. Haha, it's far from being the reality.
Yes, and in fact, actually, what you even said about top lane there even makes me think that like Damwon really are the new T1, because obviously T1 had all those years where the joke was, because they kept winning Worlds, it was like, right, who wants to come and win Worlds next? And obviously it was like Marion, then it was Duke, then Hooney tried. Like, if people don't know, my boy's Flame, who I always wanted to be on like an elite team again, he even tried out twice and was supposedly like, down to the final 2 or whatever. I even had motherfuckers telling me privately who have like inside connects, he's in, it's going to be SKT Flame. And I was like, why would you play games in my heart? Especially because, by the way, you had to go and join fucking Immortals. Imagine someone telling you it's going to be in T1, and then you just go, oh no, actually, you just have to join Immortals instead. Like, whatever, what the fuck is this? So anyway, if we go now onto the other side of the bracket, right, the Gen.G versus EDG series, right, this is quite interesting for me, because if I said T1 powered as the tournament went on, Gen.G came into Worlds, with even less hype than T1 because they've been the second best Korean team for so long. I mean, you could even say at times they were actually maybe better than some of the old T1 lineups in past years. It's just they used to choke the final was the storyline. They would always be in the final, but somehow they wouldn't win it. T1 would find a way to beat them. Maybe they're more clutch. Who the fuck knows what the reasons are? It's years ago now. But this year particularly, I feel like people got really bored of Damwon. Like, I don't even think it's that they were that bad. It's that people just think they're a boring team. As you said, sometimes not very decisive. In the past, at least, players like BDD sometimes seemed a bit set in their ways. You kind of know what they... I would say basically at one point in time, people felt like BDD was the Korean power of evil. So I know it's a reference you'll appreciate. Like, they just thought he only plays as champions. He plays as champions exactly the same way. You know exactly what he's going to do. And let's be real, he's not going to like 1v9 like Caps would if I'm using the PoE versus Caps example, you know. If that's Showmaker versus BDD in this extreme Korean versus EU example I'm trying to draw here. So in that world, right, I feel like, again, if you look at Worlds, because they actually failed to even make the final of LCK, most people were like, who gives a fuck about Gen.G? And in fact, a lot of people thought that group was wide open. Some people had Mad Lions winning it. I think you did. Some people maybe thought any team can do something in that group. If you look from the group onwards, which they won, if you look in the quarterfinals, loads of people were picking C9. They dominantly won this series. Like, at this point in time, BDD, his team, they seem like they've reached a peak for this year. So the question is, how good actually are Gen.G and how good are they against EDG for you?
Gen.G are very good. Like, that's a mistake to think that they are not playing very good. I don't think they play as good as T1 and Damwon, but they're playing very good. And they're learning as well. I feel like they've been growing a little bit. They have a big issue on the top side of the map.
Yes.
That Sinan unfortunately hasn't been able to exploit. I think that Sinan really underperformed this series as well. But overall, the problem I have with Gen.G is just, they are not very interesting to watch for me because they don't bring anything new to the screen. I know what decent or good of right macro playing right, I know what it is, but they don't have an insane fight resolution the way Damwon has. They don't have the aggressivity that you see new Team 1 having. They don't have like an insane player that plays out of his mind like Chovy, like HLE did. So except if you're very, very excited about seeing a front-to-back team fight and pushing leads with pushing tier 2s and synchronizing wave with Baron, Gen.G is not super appealing. So I do understand why there is a lack of hype for them. I'm personally not super hype about watching them. But you have to give them the props that they deserve. And the first one is BDD is playing the best League of Legends he's played his whole life. And he's just carrying the team. People used to say ruler. I'm very sad that Rajcula, after a fantastic year, is kind of out of shape, especially due because it's range versus range meta all across the board, and I don't think like he's very specialized in that field, so he's kind of like lacking champion where he has a comfort zone. Cleed has always been a fantastic jungle. I was very, very sad when he left T1 because I thought he was a very good fit, but no, he found a home in Gen.G and plays amazing. Life is very good support. So overall, it's a very well-rounded team that plays very good. I don't think like they're favorite for me. Like they're favorite against EDG because the pass give them favorite in terms of playstyle. But it's very hard to picture them world champion. That's it. It's just they play good. They don't play fantastic. And in this tournament specifically, two teams are playing fantastic League of Legends. So it's very hard to hype them. And unlike EDG, that's always a question mark because it's China, because all the reason you can find for a Chinese team to perform better after quarterfinals, you don't see Gen.G having this massive step up playing like Ultra Instinct and like from semifinals and in finals. So that's why people are like, if EDG against Gen.G, maybe I think that most of the people root for secretly for EDG because they want to see something else than a Korea versus Korea in the final.
Yes, and especially because, I mean, you alluded to it there, especially because EDG didn't play a Korean team in a series yet. They played T1 obviously twice in the group, but because they played RNG, like anyone who's ever watched Worlds over the years know, specifically the LPL versus LPL best of fives are some of the craziest game within a game matches you've ever seen. You've got in all of the history of Worlds. It's famous actually that sometimes the underdog wins. Like it's happened in many of them. You go back like season 3, season 4. It goes all throughout Worlds actually. It's very famous. And I will also say this as well. Because of how crazy those LPL like Civil War matches are, it makes it really hard to know if the team that wins is good or they're weak because they often look very messy. Like I'm thinking of when FPX won Worlds. If I'd have asked you, does FPX win Worlds after that IG semi-final? Oh, wait there a second. I think your camera went off. Wait there a second. I think you... Wait there.
Hello.
Yo,
Sorry.
it's all
I
right.
think
I think the connection
my
just dropped.
computer went.
It's all right.
Crazy.
There you go. If I was to ask you after that FPX versus IG series, which was a bloodbath for everyone remembers in the semi-finals, like, does FPX wins Worlds? I don't think anyone would say that. I think everyone would be like, G2 for sure. Like, that was like, what a terrible semi. Like, also they'd go like, FPX was terrible in groups. They even lost, like, it actually looked like, they weren't that crazy, because I feel like just the LPL style, it'll never look as dominant as the Korean style when they win against each other. So as a result, because they played RNG, it was a messy series. It went all 5 games. Half of it was like draft adaptation, etc., and weird picks like animated all the time that I'm probably not going to see very much of. I feel like some people, they have lost the luster for EDG, except what you said. They want like a diverse final. They want it to be like a Korean team versus a LPL team, and they want it to just be like, I can't even envision how it's going to be. Whereas some of these other matches, if it's Gen.G or it's versus Damwon or T1, well, we have seen those matches. We do have a sense how they're going to go. There might be tweaks. I think even those teams, if you know Koreans, would play fairly close to their playing styles. And if you know Koreans, they just kind of play it out and they hope they're better on the day. So my question about EDG goes like this. What is the ceiling of this team? Like, you're saying maybe Gen.G's a favourite. EDG can win this series? Can EDG win Worlds?
I think that the odds are so heavily towards the other side of the bracket that they can, because obviously it's China, and I don't wanna put them like, I'm not gonna be on the hate train of saying, China's overrated and stuff, because all they need is one team to win Worlds, and then every mouth has to close, right?
Yes.
Because everybody just only remembers the winner. They need to make major changes to the way they play. But the thing is, quarterfinals, China versus China, it's never like you never play the champion, you play the player, right? Like, They know each other so well in LPL that you can't really gauge from the quarterfinal. I still think that the matches versus T1 were very interesting, and I think that if they get a better read on the meta and they kind of adjust their play, they can be much more dangerous than what they looked. So I'd say that EDG has chances. I would say Gen.G comes favorite because they looked so shiny in the quarterfinals. But yeah, don't count EDG. I think they can be like, the world final can be EDG versus Damwon or T1, and it can be a 3-2. Like that.
Okay.
It would be slightly surprising. I don't say like the odds are the biggest, but it can happen. EDG winning the whole thing, maybe, but I am not a believer of that.
Right, here's one where I thought would be interesting. Even though, listen, the game has progressed a lot beyond like specific role versus role directly, obviously in lane. And I'll even say, if you look at this tournament, it's not that much about just raw laning. I mean, it just isn't. Like, it's about what you do in the mid game and the team fights, obviously. Here's my question. An interesting detail about these two teams is two of their strong positions, funnily enough, the positions that are all Korean, are obviously mid in ADC. We've got BDD versus Scout, and then we've got Ruler versus Viper. Now, what do you think about the strength of these players contrasted against each other in this tournament?
I think Scout has been playing worse than BDD, but it's very hard to play better than BDD in this tournament, to be frank. Like, this guy has been, I think he has probably been the best mid laner with Showmaker in this whole tournament. Like, he's playing out of his mind, out of his career, pretty much. Like, I didn't even think that he could play at this level. So, and the meta fits him perfectly, because if you look at the top picked champ besides Aurelia,
signatures,
it's just like Syndra, Yana, Zia, so TF. So he doesn't play TF, but he can play most of them. Rise. So I would say BDD has the edge on the mid matchup. Viper is still the best ADC on the planet. I mean, I don't doubt that at a single moment. So as good as Ruler is, I think that Ruler is a min-max player. Like, he's not crazy in the way he plays. He's just very, very good overall. But I would still give the edge to Viper, because I think that Viper has he's really crazy, man. Like, what he does in the game, like, if you look at his solo queues or his plays in competitive, he never dies, puts so much damage, has like reads 3 or 4 moves ahead of what people are gonna do, so he just saves his flash for the right moment and stuff. Both ADC are great, but still, I'd say probably on the bot lane, EDG has the advantage. That's why I think this series is very interesting, is because I don't think that top lane it's for sure for ADG, but aside from top, I think it's very, very close in terms of skill.
Right, in terms of the ADC matchup, again, we have to reference the earlier discussion about MF and what's being played in the bot lane, because this isn't even last year's Worlds where you might have been able to play something like Ashe, Caitlyn, like, you know, obviously we saw some shining from like Huafeng, obviously himself, Ruler, very good player at the time. You could pull off some amazing moves. If we look at this year's meta, and as you say, like most people had Viper, best ADC in the world, I mean, probably contended for best player in the world. In this current meta, doesn't seem like ADC's been as impactful. Like, are the champions there for him to actually win the series for EDG, do you think?
Aphelios is very important. Aphelios is really the champion they should not leave for Viper. Aside from that, I think that the player can play the Lucian Misfortune thing, because Lucian Nami thing. Yeah. They are not. I don't think they should go on Yuumi. They should just ban it. But if it's Ezreal, I don't see him like playing that much Misfortune. Like, he can, but I'd rather see him on Ezreal. I'd rather see him on Aphelios or any hyper carry. But I feel like Misfortune is very much like for ADCs that like playing mages, if you see my point.
Yes.
I don't think that Misfortune is that much of an ADC because she's such a short range and her ult is so strong that you just want to be well positioned, press R, and expect your team to actually land the CC at the moment the bullets are going through, otherwise you're kind of useless.
Sure. Right. Obviously, the interesting detail about EDG was, I mean, this is why actually it's kind of fitting they're supposed to be the champions of the LPL, is people were obviously touting when you have the best ADC, you better have the best team fighting, that better be a really big strength of yours. Right, in this tournament, I have to say, when I watched the quarterfinals between EDG and RNG, I was like, oh boy, I can't wait for some 5v5 team fights. And then the joke is, I watched 5 games and at the end I was like, I never got any team fights. There never was any, right? Will I get proper team fights in this one?
Yes, because Gen.G only knows how to front to back. That's where Gen.G has limitations. They only play like, hey, they're gonna be Drake fights. Gen.G needs their Drake. EDG is gonna give them a good fight at the Drake. So I think that it might be even like a super interesting series to watch. Probably more entertaining for the people who like the kills and the aggressivity. I'd rather watch T1 versus Damwon, but I think that people underestimate how good the second semifinal can be.
On the top lane angle, very quickly, when you discussed it earlier, it's actually also, it shows how strong some of the Gen.G players have been, that they've got to this point in the tournament and they clearly have an identity crisis themselves in top lane. Because if you come to Worlds and you aren't playing the player who's been in your team for ages, Rajcula, and instead you're playing this guy Birdle, who as far as I can tell is like a fucking one-trick Irelia player, and you saw when he doesn't have it, he has massive problems. He was even hinting against some of the Western teams and kind of giving them chances in games. Right, that suggests to me, like, they aren't idiots. They must have scrimmed. I'm sure they thought that really was their best chance to use him in the games. So if instead it's Rajcula who plays, something has happened to this guy in terms of his form. He doesn't look like the same player from LCK. If Birdall plays, look, as much as you might draw a ban in the actual draft phase, I don't know that he can actually play at this level. And you implied earlier, like, Flandre from EDG is going to be better, right? When I saw Flandre in that RNG seat, he basically just had Graves, like maybe the strongest top lane champion every single fucking time. And he looked fine. So what do you think of the top lane matchup in this one? And is there anything we should look out for?
I mean, Flandre makes mistakes. I don't think he's he didn't play well in the RNG series, but he went well in lane. But I think afterwards he made a lot of mistakes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Rajcula is facing the same thing as from some, for example, someone like Adam had to experience. Is like you spend the whole year playing Darius, Sett, Renekton, like all these bruiser that just want to go in, and suddenly you're playing Jace, Kennen, Gnar, Lucian, Graves. Like, this is a very different playstyle. Like, that has nothing to do with the usual strength of a top laner. Like, if you look at Odo, besides Kennen, he didn't feel like good either. No. There's a lot of players in this tournament that don't know what to do with this champion. I feel like Khan excels on ranged champions. He has always done, and you clearly see it. But it's not easy to play. People always feel like playing range in top is easy because it's cheesy. But
it's supposed to be OP,
range versus
right?
Range versus range is a nightmare, because whoever gets the lead in top lane, because it's such a long lane, it gives you so much more option in terms of wave management, so you can really screw your opponent. And if your jungle doesn't come, you can't play the game at all. So whoever gets an early lead is gonna demolish the lane, and that's very, very hard because it looks always very polarizing. Like someone looks really good in a matchup, and you're the one who looks terrible. And I think because Rajcula doesn't really understand all the subtle things about laning as a range versus range in top lane, especially in terms of trading patterns and like using trading in the wave. You see him just giving up the wave pressure, and then he doesn't do anything in the lane, and usually it just ends up being dove. And I don't think that Birdle does any different in that regard. I feel like it's just they don't have a great top laner in that tournament, unfortunately, because Riot has made a range versus range meta out of the blue.
Yes.
A month after everybody was playing Seth, Renekton, and Darius and all these melee champions.
If you're taking Gen.G as the favourite for this one, tell me for EDG, which player would you want to perform at their best or overperform if EDG was going to win the series?
I think it has to be Scout. Because it's the same pattern as T1. They have better sight. Therefore, mid has to get some pushing the waves to be able to rotate on sides. And that can only be achieved if the mid jungle, when I speak about mid, I always speak about mid jungle. If the mid jungle can create some type of pressure to crash a wave and rotate around the map, and that's always come back to the ability of the mid lane to perform. If you look at, for instance, Mad versus Damwon, the game one when there was the Syndra versus Orianna that everybody was speaking about, because Showmaker had so much space in that lane. Like he got TP advantage and TP on the bot side of the map, and actually got a kill, and an assist, and it was all him, like just mid diff.
Yes.
So if Scout can execute that, not on that level, but if he can get some space, his side laners are gonna give him space. So question is, can Scout move to his sides to actually create a lead? Otherwise, EDG is gonna have to fight against fantastic looking Gen.G around Drakes.
This video was kindly supported by Lager15, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Skaparen, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Chris, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, a special thanks goes out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask a question for my monthly AMA? Want teasers for upcoming content or interview guests have I done, etc.? Do you want to take part in one of those donated discussions? Well, if you want any of the above and previously mentioned, put your money where your mouth is and join the Screwluminati today at the description box link to Patreon.